5x5. You've even got just the start of a kicker point on there. With a little rust color coming out. Can you handle that one, Dad?
Maybe.
These older, bigger bucks offer the most skilled whitetail hunter all the challenge he or she could ever imagine. Collecting trophy class bucks on a reasonably regular basis sets one apart from the everyday sportsman. This too is possible for you if you choose to dedicate the effort. In this video program, you will hunt side by side with some of the nation's top whitetail hunters. They will share techniques and experiences with you. While no hunting methods are foolproof, these men share certain common denominators based on sound principles. These principles are gained from reading, discussion with other knowledgeable hunters, and most importantly, using common sense to learn from personal experiences. They also take the time to analyze why deer do what they do.
Although the shallow grass does show blood pretty well. Here's one here.
Every successful trophy hunter spends many hours in the whitetail's habitat, reading and interpreting sign, trying to solve the enigma of the white-tailed deer.
This one here's popped off.
Yeah.
The actual harvesting of a buck is the easy part. The difficult part is getting oneself into position to have the opportunity to take a trophy. Oddly enough, many people don't stop to think that not all states or areas within a state hold trophy bucks. For example, Florida has never produced a Boone and Crockett trophy. Chances of taking, or at least seeing such an animal are good in Ohio, Indiana, Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Texas, or Montana. You have to hunt where the trophies live. Being able to recognize a trophy animal is next in importance. A trophy class animal will truly take your breath away. A good rule of thumb: if you are wondering if the animal you're looking at is a trophy, forget it. When you see one, there will be no question in your mind. Let's examine what factors influence antler growth and what a trophy head looks like. Three main factors control the size of a buck's antlers: food supply, gene pool, and age, all of which are interdependent. In general, antlers reflect the vigor and health of a buck. First, a buck must have an abundant supply of high-quality feeds, preferably having a protein content of 14 to 16%. Antlers are a luxury tissue. If a buck comes out of winter in poor condition, most ingested protein goes into rebuilding body tissue rather than antler growth. Second, a buck must be a genetically superior animal to grow exceptional antlers. He must be sired from a gene pool that contains outstanding bucks. Third, a buck must be permitted to live long enough to grow big antlers. Even a genetically superior animal on good range that is killed at a 1.5 to 2-year-old age will have a small rack. Ideally, Bucks reach maximum antler growth at 5.5 to 8.5 years of age. Unfortunately, in many parts of the whitetail's range, he is harvested at a much younger age. There are certain fixed guidelines to help you determine if the buck you are looking at is trophy class. As frequently is the case, you may have only a split second to reject or harvest an animal. And to spice up the situation, most whitetail hunters, expert and novice alike, will be very lucky to see one Boone and Crockett trophy in a lifetime. About 70% of a rack's total score comes from the length of its main beam plus the total length of all its points. About 18% of the rack's score comes from its mass or thickness. And surprisingly, only about 12% comes from the inside spread. Interestingly enough, there are heads in the top 100 which have less than an 18-inch inside spread. But there are no heads with short main beams, the average length of a main beam being an unbelievable 27.5 inches. In summary, all trophies have long main beams and tines. If a head is lacking in these two areas, it must be made up for in the spread or mass measurements. Studying mounted heads of known scores is excellent practice. This buck came from Illinois. The impressive head isn't built to score well. It's 31 inches wide and has 30-inch main beams. The antlers weigh 11 pounds with plenty of mass. Because of unequal tine lengths, the right and left sides didn't match. If they did, this would be a world record. Now let's evaluate the living, walking animal. This buck was raised from a fawn, and his age is known to be 3.5 years. He's carrying only his third rack, and it is impressive as it has good mass and tine length. By age 6.5, he will be an excellent trophy. Here is a spike buck that is 18 months old. Spikes are genetically inferior animals and do not have the potential to grow trophy racks. Now look at this buck, which, like the spike shown before, is only 18 months old. He already has developed several antler branches, and this is just his first rack. He has excellent potential. Demonstrated here by this mature buck is a set of antlers having good mass or thickness. Antler spread is the widest inside distance between the left and right antlers. Generally, the distance between the ear tips is 16.5 inches, and this can be used as a reference when judging spread. Finding a buck such as this with good mass, spread, and tine length is no easy task. Like the preceding animal, this buck has everything, except for one flaw: short brow tines. Any sportsman would be very fortunate to see bucks of this caliber. Both heads have excellent main beam and tine length, along with great mass and spread. The buck on the left is the Montana state record. It scores 199 3/8 Boone and Crockett points, and ranks as the 6th largest buck ever taken. To become a competent judge of whitetail racks, you must look at and study a lot of bucks. If the bigger bucks have an Achilles heel, it is the rut or breeding cycle, particularly in an area that has a high number of mature breeding bucks. This is the period in which the buck's behavior is modified to its greatest extent by breeding activities. Watch this buck carefully. It's 2:30 in the afternoon, and although nervous about exposing himself, he can't resist the doe. During this rutting period, a hunter will have the most success by taking advantage of the buck's weakness to wander and leave thick cover during daylight hours. The buck will tend to be less cautious. The rut occurs at different times in differing latitudes and is stimulated by the length of daylight hours. The buck creates rubs and scrapes, all of which serve notice a breeding buck is in the area. Just look at the intensity of this rutting activity, all taking place in broad daylight. In general, during the rut, it is a good idea to pay attention to where the does are and their movement patterns. The horn rattling technique of hunting whitetail deer was spawned from the nature of the whitetail rut. Rattling may be defined as the banging of antlers together so as to mimic two bucks fighting. Biologists state that bucks fight most often when in the presence of a doe in breeding heat. Watch the reaction of a whitetail buck out of sight over a ridge when he hears these two mule deer sparring. So apparently, if an outriding buck hears the sounds of two bucks fighting, he responds, expecting to find a doe in estrus and hoping for a little action. To rattle successfully, several conditions must come together simultaneously. The rut must be in full swing, and the areas must have the high buck-to-doe ratio with the bucks of the older, more dominant type, and there should be little or no wind. This whitetail, his curiosity satisfied, recognizes he has the wrong species. It's a method to become easily discouraged with, but can be highly effective in the proper circumstances and conditions.
With more likelihood you're not going to be
there. There are very few absolutes in this whitetail hunting, but there is one: pre-season scouting. Scouting good whitetail habitat prior to and during the hunting season is the backbone of a successful hunt.
These bigger limbs, Chase, they tend to rub with the part of the horn between their first tine, which is the brow tine, and the burr, their antler, which is the part next to the skull. They'll get down in there and really...
Deer movement routines, trail networks, rub patterns and densities, scrape locations, feeding and bedding areas, and the travel lanes in between are all crucial to understanding and patterning a buck's habits. Many hunters wander at random with little or no preparation and accidentally stumble on a good buck. But most often, they shoot the first small buck they see. Collecting and studying shed antlers in your favorite hunting area is an excellent way to determine the numbers, age class, and size of the bucks.
Scrapes, rubs, trails, pellets, beds, feeding areas, sightings, and you notice we've coded these things in on our map.
As you scout, chart all the sign and its location on paper, and you soon see deer use patterns developing. Tree stand sites will literally jump out at you. And finally, we must discipline ourselves to pass over small younger bucks or inferior older bucks. You will get an unexpected thrill letting substandard bucks go and putting your hard-earned skills against a genetically superior animal. It's really a matter of moving one more rung up the ladder of hunting maturity and understanding. Now that we've got everything wrapped up in a nice, neat package, it could all fly out the window when hunting season begins. Notice this buck and several does are relaxed and feeding. If you're lucky enough to hunt relatively undisturbed deer such as these on private property or in the mountains of Montana, Idaho, or Wyoming, the previously described behavior patterns will hold true. Undisturbed deer maintain more normal behavior routines and are therefore more predictable and offer a better hunting opportunity. Deer that are harassed daily and shot at repeatedly become totally nocturnal and deviate from normal behavior and travel patterns. This presents a very difficult hunting situation. Now, we invite you to sit back and relax as we take you into several hunting situations which demonstrate many of the subtleties of hunting white-tailed deer. All the hunts took place in the Northwest United States. However, all techniques demonstrated will be useful to hunters everywhere. John Wozniak has developed a rather unusual method of reaching undisturbed deer in an area that also holds record-class bucks. At considerable expense and effort, he travels by jet boat down a river to reach isolated wooded islands. The river and the islands are bordered by agricultural private land that is posted, or at best, has limited access. The deer in this area have limited hunting pressure and a good, reliable food source.
There's a good brush pile behind me. It's a good bedding area. That buck isn't going to leave a bunch of does he's with. As usual, the closest one's the littlest one. He's going the other way now. Boy, I had a dandy buck come right down this same trail of does using last year.
Throughout this season, John made numerous time-consuming trips down the river. He placed multiple tree stands and sat many mornings and evenings, but at no time did a large enough buck come within bow range. Finally, he was down to his last day.
Well, it's the last day. See what happens this morning. There's deer out in front of me. There's a couple deer. There's a spike. There's another deer behind him. It's a decent buck. They're getting closer. A little bit farther, maybe.
The big buck senses things are not right. He hangs up behind the brush before finally getting enough.
Something just isn't right. Must be that wind. Dang. I don't know if he smelled me or an old doe. This is going to be easy. Just keep coming. Just turn your head now. I think I'll be able to find that one with the glasses. Yeah, it'll be an easy trail to follow. Bleeding way up high. There he's down. Well, it'll be good eating.
The study of scrapes has really come into vogue here in the last few years, and it has pretty significant meaning to deer hunting, although I don't think the total final...
The next two hunts demonstrate the effectiveness of tree stand hunting. Prior to the first hunt, Ed Wolf coaches Jason Micheletto on the benefits of preseason scouting and sign interpretation to relate to tree stand hunting. They did this 1 month prior to the season so as to disturb the deer as little as possible.
Buck deer during the rut or the breeding season make scrapes throughout their range. They simply paw the dirt back. We'll talk about primaries and secondaries in a minute. Location, they normally make these on old logging roads in trail intersections, major trail intersections, and as you see here, they'll sometimes make them in one of their own trails or immediately adjacent to a single trail in a relatively open area. And they generally put them under a tree limb. You see this little twig of this tree hanging over this scrape, usually 3 to 4 feet off the ground. They'll have a limb. And what they'll do is they'll stand up on their hind feet, grab this limb in their mouth, or on all 4 feet if they can reach it, mouth it and chew it and get saliva on it, and then let it spring back across their preorbital scent gland, which is right at the corner of their eye. This puts their scent on this limb and advertises their presence in the area.
Yeah, hi, Ed.
I heard you shoot.
Yeah, I think I got her. I think I did.
She just come out of your stand?
She was kind of over there, and I shot, and she kind of flinched and ran that way.
She did flinch when you shot?
Yeah, she
good,
flinched.
Good. Well, I was up here sitting in this other stand. I heard you shoot, come running over. Just like we planned.
Yeah, I heard you coming.
Okay, well, now, you got a line on her where she went out of the sight?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's go see if we can pick up some blood. It's been about 15, 20 minutes. Tell you what, we might wait another 5 minutes or so.
Okay.
Get a little bit more time, and we'll start tracking her up. That's great, buddy. I hope you got it. We'll go see you.
Bye.
Okay, Jason, now your stand is right there. The deer was standing here?
Real close.
Okay.
I think it was here.
Okay, well, we'll just see if we can't find some blood. Now, Jason, we got a real problem here this morning, though. These leaves, these autumn leaves. Look at this one, for instance. It looks just like blood.
Yeah, it does.
And we're going to have a difficult time differentiating between these leaves and blood. And also this grass, the blood will tend to fall down through this grass, although this yellow grass does show blood pretty well. But with no snow, it's going to be tough. We're going to have to go real slow and easy and see if we can't locate some blood. Well, Jace, we've been tracking here about 10 minutes. We haven't found one single drop of blood. So what I usually do in a case like this is, you notice we kind of got a little alley. In fact, we're on a deer trail.
Yeah.
And these deer, when they're running off after they've been hit, will kind of just follow the point of least resistance and follow an existing trail. So let's just follow along the way we last saw her in that direction, along the point of least resistance. Jason, look it, buddy.
Yeah.
There she is. You got her. All right. Go up to her, son. That's it. And check her out. Make sure she's dead. She looks pretty dead.
He's real dead.
All right. All
yeah.
right. Hey, buddy. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Found her.
That scouting paid off.
Yeah,
Right? Always
it did.
let that come through. She's a nice big doe.
Yep.
In this sequence, Jim Chin uses a well-placed tree stand to position himself to harvest a doe in an area overpopulated with deer. Tree stand hunting is the most effective way to consistently harvest deer, especially when archery hunting.
You're moving right over behind the bush. Boy, I'm glad the wind's quiet. My smell shouldn't travel over to them. Oh, she's looking this way. Oh, good, good. Problem with these two does, if one sees me, I'm in bad shape here. They got to come just a little further out. Ah, they're feeding. They're undisturbed. They're in good shape here. Ah, she's starting to move. Come on, girl, move out just a little left. Darn, I just can't quite see around the tree here. Needs to move just a little. Here she comes. Here she comes. Come on, one more step.
She's dead. Well, the spine shot really did the number on her. Nice doe. She's in good shape.
Watch again as we replay Jim's kill in slow motion. The doe, though only 15 yards away, hears the shot, squats, and nearly dodges the arrow, which strikes her in the spine. This is the spine of Jim's doe. The broadhead not only penetrated the vertebral body, but also severed the spinal cord. Our action now moves to the semi-mountainous country of central Montana. Rob Hazelwood, a game biologist, guides hunters Dwayne Sidler and Phil Wright on a ranch which he manages for trophy buck production. The ranch is bisected by a heavily brushed creek bottom that is surrounded by alfalfa and wheat fields, habitat ideal for whitetail deer. By positioning themselves on the bluff overlooking the creek, the hunters could easily observe the rutting activity and movement patterns of the bucks. Prior to Rob's guests arriving, he's careful to scout the ranch, not only to check the movement patterns of the deer, but also to determine the stage of the rut cycle. Rob attempts to manage the ranch for big buck production by harvesting surplus does and taking certain age classes of bucks. Binoculars and spotting scopes are indispensable tools in Rob's management plans. As you see, the ranch has a good population of animals with a good buck-to-doe ratio. Also notice the pheasants feeding among the deer. Rob and 74-year-old Phil Wright are up well before sunrise, glassing the brushy sloughs. Rob moved Phil down the bluff, closer to where he expected the buck to appear. Phil had explained that his eyesight and reflexes weren't those of a younger man, and that he didn't feel comfortable taking a shot in excess of 200 yards. Phil's position was lower than the camera angle, and he was unable to get a clear shot. At the same time that Rob and Phil were trying their luck, Pierce Nelson, seen here in the foreground, was guiding Dwayne Sidler on another part of the ranch. Dwayne is an avid whitetail hunter from Pennsylvania. Dwayne had two problems trying to take this buck. He was looking for a trophy that would score at least 145 Boone and Crockett points. This buck was not that large. Also, the buck was at about 400 yards, too distant for a certain kill. The next day, Phil and Rob set up in a different area. They didn't see any bucks large enough to take. They did observe two coyotes teaming up to hunt a doe who sought the safety of a creek.
She's trying to stay in the water for safety. They've got her camera all around. There she goes. There's her. Here comes the coyote right after. Look at him swimming. Looks like a retriever out there. There's a coyote going up on the bank now. There he goes, running it. Here comes another one out. Unbelievable.
Later that same day, Rob and Phil moved to an area on the ranch that had an overpopulation of does.
Hey. Yeah.
Stand there looking at it. Huh? Just fell. In certain situations, these calls work real good, and it's nice to have one with you where you can, try and use it to your advantage. If you get in a situation like this, where the deer had the sun right in their eyes, use the call, and that doe just came in perfectly.
I think that being right at the peak of the rut, that makes it more effective.
I think so.
Yeah.
There's so much activity with the bucks chasing the does, and everything is just generally stirred up. You can use it, in the spring or summer. You can get out there and call, and the deer will oftentimes, out of curiosity, come in and just check out when it is. Well, let's get over there and dress out that deer.
Phil, Professor Emeritus of Wildlife Biology and Zoology at the University of Montana, discusses the harvesting of does.
Where deer are abundant, that you can't adequately harvest the number of animals that need to be harvested with a buck law. The result is we have doe seasons in many places. You can control the deer numbers by shooting does. You can't control the numbers by shooting bucks only.
Well, that's an important part of our program here on this ranch, Phil, is we try and do surveys and get an idea on what our buck to doe ratio is, and then also try and harvest the does based on those surveys right there. And, I'd say she's a 4.5-year-old doe, and she had a couple of fawns with her. She's a nice adult, and that's what we try and harvest here. And, depending upon those surveys, take whatever's necessary to try and maintain a good ratio. And if you do also, as you well know, you kind of, if you don't overpopulate an area, your deer are going to be reproductively fit. And, provided the forage is there, and you'll get a lot of 20.
The morning of the last day of Phil's hunt had plenty of action. Watch as we show you the events as they unfolded that day.
Tell me if you can, don't crack out there.
This buck is 350 yards away and moving. Phil passes. Several does move out of cover and into good shooting range. However, they fail to pull a buck out with them. As the day wore on, the deer appeared everywhere, but were still out of range.
Why did you didn't do that?
It's coming right towards you. Broadside.
Try as he might, Phil was unable to see this deer. The frustrations of body positioning, adjusting rifle rests, and wind-chilled fingers caused Phil to lose this buck.
Yeah.
What?
Shooting.
You did a shot, brother. You did nothing.
Finally, everything comes together, except for one thing.
Nothing cold turkey. Take a shot. Yeah. No, too early. Okay, stop. If you can, then stop. I used to shot a foot in front of him. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, he did.
You did.
Dwayne and Pierce, after observing the deer's movement patterns from the bluff shown here in the background, decided to construct a ground blind closer to the deer's feeding area.
Can't tell you yet. Pretty nice time, Tony.
Being willing to adjust one's hunting plans according to deer movements is important. This smaller buck passed by within 150 yards of Dwayne and Pierce's blind. Suddenly, from behind, Dwayne sees the buck he's been waiting for. He makes a split-second decision and shoots.
I'm sure this is where he went in. Look,
I know I hit him.
got blood right here. He's hit hard.
There's some more right up here.
Let's just take it slow and stay on the blood.
There's another picture. Got more blood? Yeah. Okay. Stay right on it.
Oh, I know he's hit hard. Dwayne, look at this. This is a good blood spot. This is about chest height. That deer is hard hit.
Good shot. I had to hit him through the heart and the lungs. I was right on that sucker.
I'd call it a heart-lung shot. Otherwise, he wouldn't be running this far.
He's going to be piled up here, Pierce. There he is, Pierce.
All right.
Dead deer, buddy.
Dead deer.
Good shooting, Glenn. I knew we couldn't be too far in there. Right. Good work. One shot kill.
All right, Dwayne. That is one good-looking buck. 5 by 5. He's even got just the start of a kicker point on there. With a little rust color coming out in the hair there on the head.
Big body deer.
Big deer.
Man, oh man, big deer.
And look at where you shot him.
Good.
Right through the heart.
All right.
Yeah.
He wasn't going far.
Now the blood we were finding, I knew he had to be here.
We passed a lot of bucks up.
I think
Crafted that sucker.
we saw some bigger and a lot smaller, and this is one heck of a nice buck. We've been hunting for him for a month, and I've seen him, but we hadn't been able to get on him, and that is a nice buck.
We've been out here 4 days now.
Yeah.
4 full days.
He was heavy in the rut. We've watched him chasing does for about 10 days now, and he's a good one. He's a buck to be proud of right
I
there.
can't get over the body size of them too.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
His live weight is over 200 pounds, you can be sure. You know, Dwayne, when we started following that blood coming in out of the open, and we were real careful trying to pick our way and make sure we had blood spots. If you didn't have those blood spots to follow, as a rule, that buck's going to take the path of least resistance. If there's a trail, he's generally going to follow it if he's hard hit.
These are his home trails.
You got it. And that's exactly what this buck did.
You got it.
He came in on the trail, and the only place we had to be careful was checking where that trail forked back there. And once we found a blood spot, took us right to him. That's a nice buck.
Couldn't be happier. All worth it. All that walking, all that sitting.
Those cold mornings.
Those cold mornings.
Yeah. That's a heavy buck.
Coincidentally, within minutes of when Dwayne killed his buck, Rob and Phil were set up only a half mile away. Phil was about to be rewarded for all his efforts. Phil and Rob had one unexpected problem. The deer approached from the opposite end of the field. This forced Phil to readjust his position. Rob was concerned that the deer would detect the sound and movement.
See, there's another buck.
Okay.
What? Did I see it?
Nice shot, Phil. Nice shot, Phil.
Thanks very much.
See, I told you you
Fine,
can
yeah.
still shoot.
Yeah, I know I can still shoot if I get my feet on the ground. And I can rest the gun solidly, then I can do it, yeah.
Nice, clean kill.
Okay.
Super.
Well, it's empty.
10, I was off 10 yards.
Boy, he's got a double brow.
Yeah, he sure does.
See where he's hit? Right there. Okay.
Excellent shot. Double brow. Pretty buck. Gonna eat good.
Nice one. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine.
We're out there for the final hour of the hunt.
That was
You couldn't
that
ask
was out
for
at about 4:15.
That's excellent. You know, this, one thing about these eastern Montana whitetails is they sure eat good.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a finer eating animal around than a nice grain-fed buck like this. He's gonna, you know, he's a younger buck, but, you know, we've seen a heck of a lot like this and a lot bigger on this hunt. But he's gonna eat real well. And you made a nice clean shot on him, and just the end of a good hunt.
I was happy that the bullet hit exactly where I was holding.
Yeah.
Which was right on the shoulder. Either upper shoulder is broken. The bullet went through and emerged on the other side. The animal couldn't walk once he was hit in that position.
Well, he's a nice buck, and you made a nice shot on him. Even for a 74-year-old guy.
We will now travel to Montana's Jefferson River Valley to hunt the many sloughs and creek bottoms. The brush is very thick. The only way to get the deer into the open for a shot is to use a technique where the deer are driven using people as drivers. Drive hunting is unique in that the action is always fast, requiring quick judgment as well as excellent shooting skills. Hunters are placed along known travel and escape routes frequented by deer. Drivers then work the brush and try to follow the deer along their trails to the strategically placed shooters. Let's examine several drive hunts which took place during the course of the 1988 season. All the hunts were organized and planned by Tony Schoen Sr., a local sportsman who has perfected the drive technique over the last 40 years. The first hunt takes place in an area thick with head-high buffaloberry bushes, where the hunters had spotted a nice buck the evening before. Bill takes a prime position on top of a brush pile, while the other hunter, Scott, covered the opposite end of the thicket where the buck was expected to be bedded. Scott's job was to cover the trail where the buck would travel should he circle around and backtrack the drivers. The biggest unknown factor in a deer driving situation is determining whether the buck will circle behind the drivers. The best ways to avoid a buck backtracking are to utilize wind direction, adjust the number of drivers, or position a shooter behind the drivers. Minutes after the drivers entered the brush, two does came out and ran past Bill's position. Like one will observe in other whitetail hunting situations, the bucks come out last and usually are alone. This was true in this case. The buck came out directly toward Bill.
I think he's laying over here in the ditch, Jack. Yeah, there he is. Yeah.
Pretty good shot from up over here, Ed. Bill, what is that, 175 yards?
Oh yeah, I think so. All of that.
Yeah, and then some.
He's not too bad.
Oh, perfect 5.
What do you figure? 2.5-year-old, 3-year-old buck?
2.5 years old, 5.
Something like that.
Yeah. Not too bad a buck.
She's right in there.
Got in the ditch. Should probably drag off out of here.
After dressing and loading Bill's buck, the hunters moved farther upstream to another area where they had taken big bucks in past years. On this hunt, the deer were to be driven from a thick, brushy island. From his position across the river, Scott saw several does and a coyote cross the river ahead of the drivers. Suddenly, Scott spots a buck working his way down to the river's edge. The buck hesitates, then steps onto the rock bar. Taking advantage of this situation, Scott aims and fires. Another day, Tony Shonen Jr. got his turn on the stand. His dad and Bobby were the drivers.
There he is. There's a deer right out to him.
Hey, Bob? Got one down.
Well, that was a big one.
Was it any bigger than that, huh?
Yeah. There was two in there.
There's no slouch. Boy, I ruined his cape though.
And the other one had a little bit heavier horns too.
Yeah,
They're sitting right over in there.
Where are the other drivers at? Are they just back over
Yeah,
here?
they're back over there. Tony was driving into the brush.
Yeah, let's get it. We better get back set up, Bob. There's something moving there. I can't tell if it's a buck or not though. Landed in that clump of brush there.
Okay.
Just let's go back out around here. Maybe mosey in on them a little.
Yeah. Oh, good job. Thanks. I knew that sounded good. That was that one we saw stopping there. Good job. Congratulations. We both got one. That's a nice deal. A couple of nice pieces of meat anyway. Yeah, something from the freezer. Yeah. Well, we better get them cleaned out and then get back over to mine, huh? All right. Yeah. Double back. Well, that was a nice little buck you got, though. That, better get this guy cleaned out. Looks like there's a snowstorm coming in. You know, it's a good thing you yelled buck, because he was hauling. I mean, if he hadn't been, you know, if he'd been walking, it'd be a different deal. But the rate he was going, he was coming straight through here, and he was moving. And I'd have never been ready. I don't think these automatics. I tell you, on these drives, on the standing guys should have them automatic, because they just can't. You know, you can't beat them. That quick second shot made a difference. I'd never got this buck. But it's a good thing you yelled buck too, because at least I knew what was coming then.
Jack Shonen applies a new wrinkle to traditional drive hunting. He sets in a tree stand to give him an excellent overall view of the action.
Got one, Fred.
No, that's all right.
Tree stand worked out anyway.
Yeah, that's really it. That's just a nice buck.
It's not too bad, is it?
No, not at all. I think there might have been a bigger one with him too.
Was there? I didn't see.
I jumped them both about the same time. I think at least they took off together, but you know, you never know if they're going to go in the same direction or not.
Yeah, he's the only one I saw come out. A couple little bucks.
Well, his neck's really swelled up there, Fred.
Yeah, you know, it's surprised some does didn't come through with them. Certainly this time of the year, it's about time for them to be in the rut. But, you know, it's the darndest thing. I didn't really expect to find those two bucks in that patch I drove. You notice the ice that's right here. Why they were laying right in that frozen ice, just on a high spot, right under some brush. And but did you happen to hear that shot when we first agreed to?
Yeah, I did hear you shoot down there. What did you get?
Oh, let's go down and see what it looks like.
Okay. There he is right there, Fred.
Yeah, that's him. Right? Little on top of this shit, right like that.
That's a nice buck, yeah.
He's
fairly wide, isn't
the horns are a little light, but nice and wide, and probably typical of the area here, most likely. He'll get bigger, but he's a good one, you know. But you know how we talked about the fact that when we start these drives, well, maybe 80% of the deer that are out first are the bucks. And then the does will come last. But in my years of hunting, I've always found you never want to get too fast on these drives. You know, you don't want to walk too fast, and that's what happened with this one. I laid back just a little bit after the rest of the drivers went into the brush, and I just kind of kept looking back. And sure enough, out across the field here, there he broke. And
doubling back.
Yeah, he was doubling back, and well, he was going, but jumping, bounding up and down. But lucky to get a shot in. They're hard to hit when they're going like that. So,
yeah.
But he's a good one.
Fred, you know when you're hunting these deer down in this brush, what type of bullets do you usually prefer?
Well, I use this. I guess you'd call it a blunt nose odd 6 shell, and you know, out in hunting elk, we use these solid jackets a little bit. The Corlock's.
Oh yeah, the Corlock's a little bit better.
But I like this down in the brush a little better. I have a feeling it travels through the brush a little bit. I think it doesn't deflect as quickly, and I've had a lot of success with this. Every time I take the Corlocks and go out in the brush, I don't seem to bring the deer down that I bring down with this. And it's an odd 6, a 30-06, and
that's a good caliber for real brush. You don't have to worry about it carrying out.
I guess you'd call it a utility rifle. It's really about the best rifle for hunting deer that I can find.
That was a good day, guys.
Good day, good day.
Yeah,
super.
There's a bigger one than this one got away, though. That's the bad that makes me a little unhappy. But he'll be there next year when we make the drive.
That's a damn.
We'll get it.
He'll be bigger.
He'll be bigger, yeah.
Yeah, he'll be bigger.
Get these horns out.
Destroy every one of the capes.
And so, the legacy of hunting in America's great outdoors is passed on from generation to generation.